Pardon the interruption, but I'm Mike Wilbon. Tony, we both missed 3 shows last week. Shouldn't we thank everybody who hosted the show?
Tony Kornheiser, absolutely. You got any names?
No.
I don't?
No.
No.
You know,
I don't watch when I'm on. I certainly don't watch when you're not on and I'm not on. I don't watch. I don't know who's doing this. But you know what I hope? I hope they're wearing ties. Welcome to PTI, boys and girls. In today's episode, Cam Newton gets sidelined, Carson Wentz looks mobile, and the Orioles stink. But we begin today with Miguel Cabrera hitting his 500th home run yesterday. He is the 28th baseball player to hit 500, and he's only 45 hits shy of 3,000. If Cabrera gets that, he will become only one of 7 players with the 500, 3,000 double. The other 6, Henry Aaron, Willie Mays, Eddie Murray, Rafael Palmeiro, Alex Rodriguez, and Albert Pujols. Wilbon,
wow.
What are your thoughts on this accomplishment and Cabrera's career?
Tony, the home runs and hitting the home run, that just launched me into, well, let me go to baseballreference.com and let me look up Miggy Cabrera, because it seems like he's done a lot of stuff and there's not as much praise as there is stuff. And when I got to his page and started reading it, this is like insane. First of all, I knew he had to have one batting title because he won a Triple Crown. Oh, wait, Triple Crown. Something that so few people have done in the last 50 years. And so, he's got 4 batting titles, Tony. And these every list he's on is something like, well, that only includes Ted Williams, Henry Aaron, Babe Ruth, and Lou Gehrig. And he's on these lists, these tiny little lists of people. And it led me to conclude, again, I know the home run it's fine. That was yesterday's highlight. But go deeper, boys and girls, because this is one of the great and underrated players of all time.
So I want to fixate on the 3,000 for a particular reason. I know he's not there yet, but I think he's going to get there. Because let me give you a partial list of people who did not get 3,000 hits. Babe Ruth, Ted Williams, Barry Bonds. I don't think I have to name anybody else.
No, you don't.
I don't. In terms of him being a hitter, look, he's a power hitter with 3,000 hits. 2 things are true.
And
power hitters don't get
a
lot of pitches, but power hitters don't get a lot of pitches to look at.
Right.
And slow right-handed power hitters don't ever leg anything out.
No.
And this guy was 320 or above, and let me get this right, 9 times.
9 times.
Which is an incredible wow. As a hitter, he dwarfs some of these people who are on this list with him, right? He does.
And Tony, then why isn't he more widely praised? Why isn't he more widely viewed as one of the great players of all time? He did play on a World Series championship team, which I think he had cleanup on when he's like 11 years old. How is it that Cabrera isn't on our tongues all the time as one of the great, great players in the history of this game?
Well, he should be, and then we have to ask ourselves, who's next to 500 and who's next to 3,000? To 3,000, Robbie Cano, he only needs, what?
Well, he's next to
375 hits, but he's 38 and he's suspended this whole year. And great hitters like Trout and Freeman and Altuve, they don't have 2,000. And in terms of 500, Nelson Cruz is closest. He's got 443, but he's 41. He's not getting there. Giancarlo Stanton has 332, Mike, and he's only 31 years old, but he gets hurt all the time. He's only got 27 home runs in the last 3 seasons. I think it'll be Trout, but I don't know about anybody else, and I don't even know about Trout.
Trout is slurped and praised, and legitimately so. He's not Cabrera. Trout ain't Cabrera.
Not yet.
But yet Trout, we praise Trout every day. Oh, poor Trout, he doesn't have a team that's any good. Trout ain't Cabrera, man. We have how's baseball not celebrated this dude more? It's ridiculous. The Baltimore Orioles cannot lose today because they're not playing. The O's have lost 18 straight. 18 straight. Just 3 shy of the record 21 in a row that the Orioles set back in 1988. Ken Rosenthal of The Athletic writes today that baseball needs to change the rules to discourage tanking as a way to collect high draft picks. Tone, my Cubs and the Astros too, they won the World Series using this strategy to their advantage. Is Rosenthal right, though, Tone, that baseball needs to change this?
So I want to go back for a minute to 1988 because I covered a bunch of those games. I was
know
writing
you were
a
there.
column.
You and I
think
were
you
there.
may have covered those games. You may be doing beat work at that point. They lost 21 in a row. They fired Cal Sr. after 0-6. They brought in Frank Robinson. He went 0-15 before he got a win. And that team, Mike, as you remember, had Cal Ripken Jr. and Eddie Murray. This team doesn't have anything like that. To Rosenthal's issue about collecting high draft picks, I'm not sure I agree with that for this reason. I've watched drafts in football and in basketball, and I've watched it fail in those sports. And the science is much better than in baseball. Much better. It depends on who you are picking. There's a feeling that Kenny has that there ought to be a floor. You have to spend a certain amount of money.
The floor.
And that will discourage tanking. Okay, but let me just say this. Let's look at Tampa Bay and Oakland. They don't spend any money. They're in the playoffs every year. So who's doing your scouting and who's doing your signing?
I'm okay with the floor, but of course, as usual, baseball and the union can't agree on anything in terms of how to employ the strategy to make a floor, and raise it. Maybe it should be $100 million. Who knows what it is? Some teams are spending 50. So that is weird to me, Tony. What's also strange is that the Orioles are on this trajectory again. I mean, they were on it when you mentioned they were just dreadful for years. And then from like 2012 to 16, they made the playoffs every year. They won as many games as any team in baseball over that time. They were pretty good. They didn't have a great team that won a World Series, but they were trying. And now a franchise, and Kenny Rosenthal knows his franchise as well as anybody, because I was back there in the 80s when we were both covering this team, and Kenny Rosenthal locally in Baltimore. And he knows, Tony, they were the Dodgers. They had the best minor league system, and they appear to have close to that again. I don't understand. I don't know that I want to legislate every time somebody pops up and they're smelly for a few years. I'm okay with the floor, but the draft picks very much depends on who's doing the scouting and the drafting and the developing of these players.
Here were the people that were covering the Orioles at that point. Kenny Rosenthal, Tim Kirchin, and Richie Justice.
Yeah.
That's as good a group of writers that ever covered any team, as far as I'm concerned. I blame it on ownership, Mike. I blame it on ownership. It's the third year in a row now they're going to lose over 100. All they seem to care about is their television network. They don't care about their fans, and they don't care about the team. And I think something has to be done. Let's go to football. The New England Patriots announced that Cam Newton will miss 5 days of camp because of a misunderstanding of how COVID tests are conducted away from team facilities. So Newton violated protocol. Wilbon, could this absence by Newton cost him his starting job?
Well, yes, cost him his starting job today, right now. He's not starting now. They have these stupid depth charts all the time that way too many people pay way too much attention to, but they count for something. So somebody's taking the snaps today and tomorrow, and these days that Cam Newton has to be away from the team or can deal with meetings virtually, but he ain't the starting quarterback for the next few days, is he? So he's lost that. Whether he can regain it, whether they'll pencil him into the lineup, the practice lineup, as tied for number one or a code number one, I don't know. But it's cost him this right now. And if it's close, if it's a race, it may cost him ultimately as we move toward week 1 of the National Football League's real season.
So, I've watched a little bit of the Patriots in the exhibition games that have been on TV. And I think Mac Jones has looked as good as Cam Newton, though I thought Cam Newton looked really good against Philadelphia, which looked really dreadful. He threw the ball crisply, and he threw the ball down the field, which he didn't do last year, but so did Mac Jones. My opinion is, Mike, if I ran a team, I'd start Cam Newton. I wouldn't start Mac Jones. I'd let Mac Jones sit for a while. And I think Bill Belichick is as old school as there is. I think he wants to start Cam Newton. He has said publicly, though, that if Mac Jones outplays him or if Cam Newton is unavailable, then Mac Jones could get the job. So if you want to start Mac Jones, this gives you cover to do it right now, right? It does. Gives you cover.
Yes, because you've only got one preseason game left, and who knows how each of these teams treats it differently when you have 3 now instead of 4. The third used to be the dress rehearsal. That used to be the game that the starters might get some real plays. But now, when you only got 3, but you also have these stupid practices where teams practice against each other every day for 2 or 3 or 4 days in the week, who the hell knows how each team and each coaching staff will decide that will impact who they put in the number one spot going into the regular season. So, Tony, I think these days hurt them. These days have to hurt Cam Newton not being there.
I agree. And my takeaway from this is that it seems apparent to me that Cam Newton has never been vaccinated. Because the only people subject to this particular 5-day protocol are people that haven't been vaccinated. Yeah. But he's back on Thursday, and I think their next game is Sunday. So if Bill Belichick wants to start him on Sunday, he can. I don't think we're in crisis mode yet, is my opinion. We're not in crisis mode. Let's take a break. Coming up, did Carson Wentz put the worries about his foot to rest today?
And how should Mitchell Trubisky feel about torching the Chicago Bears in Chicago on Saturday?
Issues, your issues. Let me see what's first here. What, if anything, did Mitch Trubisky prove against the Bears?
He proved that the coach didn't want to work with him because now that he's working in a system where they actually want him to play quarterback, he gets rid of the ball quickly. All of a sudden, his progressions aren't that big a deal. He throws on the run. They have him doing all the things that Matt Nagy didn't really want to have him do. And he torched the Bears. The Bears are down like 41-6 at the end of the first, or sometime in the first quarter. So this is yet another indictment of Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy. Because, they didn't know what to do. They spent too much to get him. That was dumb, and they shouldn't have drafted him anyway. But then when they got him, they didn't know how to deal with him. So Trubisky made them look like fools. And the players, his former teammates, they dapped him up. They dapped him up the whole afternoon. And I found myself rooting for Mitch Trubisky. I really did.
So let me just get the numbers straight so everybody understands them. It was 34-6 at halftime, and he was 20 of 28. And Trubisky did this in Soldier Field. So he was able to jam it to Nagy, and Nagy had to eat it right there on the spot, which I'm sure made Trubisky feel good. Like you, I find myself now rooting for Trubisky because I thought he was not done well in Chicago. But let's be fair about something. Terribly. I think that Justin Fields is probably a better prospect for the Bears at quarterback than Trubisky was.
Yes, he is.
And so I think this will work out for both sides. Trubisky's not going to play that much in Buffalo behind Josh Allen, but he'll find a place to play, and Fields will run Chicago. I mean, that's what you're looking at right now. Yeah. But in terms of what did it prove, if it proved anything, it maybe proved that Trubisky's better than Andy Dalton. That's what it would seem to prove.
At least at this point, I wouldn't disagree with that, Tony. But before Fields can run things, the Bears better get him an offensive line. We'll talk about that sometime.
Does the video of Carson Wentz running and cutting at practice change your outlook for the Colts season?
Well, Tony, this comes up because it's the first big day of Wentz back at practice. So much for 5 to 12 weeks. That looks like either a miscalculation or just a flat-out lie. And he looked good in practice. And, people who were at practice, if I read this stuff correctly, at one point he threw 45 passes in a row, took 45 snaps in a row as the first-team quarterback, blah, 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 blah. And all this is great. You want Carson Wentz. I want everybody to be healthy. And Carson Wentz, they need him. But my faith in the Colts? No, because I don't have any faith in Wentz. I mean, I don't think Wentz is all that good. I think Wentz has been completely overstated by everybody who assesses pro football. And so, no, not for me.
Okay, so if the question is, does it change my outlook? It only changes my outlook 100% unless I can go over 100%. The guy had a bad foot. You cannot run and cut like that on a bad foot. So now, as James Brown would say, he's on the good foot at this point. He's got a coach. The only coach who ever succeeded with him is Frank Reich. And Frank Reich now has what appears to be a healthy Carson Wentz. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if he is so scarred from what happened to him in Philadelphia that he's shot already as a quarterback. But if he's not, he goes to a good team. I'm pretty sure that was a playoff team last year. So yeah. I think this is a big deal. You know what? It's a big deal if Carson Wentz is actually any good. I guess you can ride on that side of the argument. I don't ride. He's not terrible. He's just overstated. He's not what half the people have him We'll see if Wright can get it out of him.
Yes, we will.
Enough email.
Yes, we will. Love Frank.
Let's take one last break, but still to come, either the Yankees or the Braves will win their...
Hey, Lance, outplays him in practice, is lights out, then yes, they will supplant Jimmy Garoppolo. But that's not the plan, nor does it need to be for a quarterback that played only one game in college last year.
Kevin Blackiston, I'll let you get back in.
Well, we know that there have been plenty of quarterbacks who in their rookie year have come in and played very well. And we know that there have been quarterbacks who have come in later, like Mahomes, and we said, why wasn't he playing the very first snap of the very first game of his career? And I just think that it's time, the way that these games are being played now, the expectations of these franchises, and the fact that you've seen what you've seen, you know what these guys can do. They traded the world to get Lance. Put him in
Flashkey?
there.
You want back in? Go
Isn't
ahead.
it possible, KB, that Mahomes played so well because he had a chance to sit and learn and watch, and maybe that's why he did so well, because he didn't start the season and get his butt kicked out there. I get drives me crazy as the media and fans go crazy for these preseason stats. They mean nothing.
Okay, but Bill, you think that not naming a quarterback puts them at an advantage over the Detroit Lions. You nodded vigorously when you heard, oh, yeah, you got to keep the Detroit Lions on their heels.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Why should he say anything now? Well, why should he, again, why should he show his hand, give them 2 players to prepare for? That's just common sense.
Common sense does not always apply when it comes to quarterbacks in the NFL. We're going to move on.
Or to getting points on
this
the
hit
show.
defies. Oh, Flashkey. I'll take that heat from you. I like it. A little fire from Bill Flashkey on a Monday. The hit on Justin Fields. All right. The Bears were down 41-6 in the fourth quarter of their preseason game, and this is the hit he takes. Oof. Earlier, Andy Dalton back-to-back 3-and-outs and booed by Holmes fans. Matt Nagy not hearing it. We need to see Dalton in the regular season. He's starting week 1 is what Nagy passed on. Emily, the Chicago right behind you. Does Nagy have this right with the quarterback of the Chicago Bears?
You guys all just mentioned Mahomes in his first year. I wish Matt Nagy came out and said, I was in Kansas City. This is what we did with Pat Mahomes. We sat him his first year. He sat behind a vet, and look how it turned out. But he hasn't outright said that. Instead, his messaging has been super confusing. It's more about what he's promised Andy Dalton rather than what's best for Justin Fields. And living here in Chicago and talking to my friends who are Bears fans, that's their biggest disconnect because it's become this self-fulfilling prophecy where now he's dug his heels and we're 2 weeks before the season. Justin Fields is still getting 3rd and 4th team reps, and he's not ready for week 1. They never gave him the chance.
Kevin Blackiston, what you read in Chicago?
Well, once again, it's almost like I have to repeat myself. I mean, here's a franchise in the Bears and a fan base that has been dying to get a quarterback. Now they've gone out and picked one, and people think he's done very well during the practices, and he's looked good against second stringers and all of that. And we know that he brings a second dimension to the game in terms of what he can do with his legs. And so I just think, once again, don't have to be worried about this guy. Send him out there. You can get your reps in practice. You can get your reps in preseason games, but we know there's nothing like the real thing, and you can put him out there now. Troy Aikman, Peyton Manning, how did it work out for them? You can point out people for whom it didn't work out, but I can also point out people.
Oh, it didn't work out for the team in the first season of those teams, right? Aikman was 0-11 on a team that, and Peyton Manning famously was 3-13 and turned it around very quickly.